For those that don't know Cloudfare, we're known as a CDN. To give a bit of perspective, we handle 71 million TLS, 71 million HTTP requests every single second, 15 million TLS handshakes per second. Depending how you count it, we have about 20% of the web involved in one way or another. We've been ahead in a lot of crypto-related migrations. TLS 1.3, we helped deploy that, encrypted DNS, client hello, and of course migrating to post-quantum cryptography. So we have done a big push, especially in our internal connections a few years ago, and I wanted to share some takeaways from that. I was hoping to see more people from ENISA and regulators here in the audience, but it's mostly technical people. Still, I think this will be interesting to hear. So I want to experience so far and what I see as issues that ahead. But I also want to say is that we're not very typical as an organization. So we are a trailblazer. That means that some things are harder. We need to write new software. We need to keep patches. We don't have standards ready, so we have to deploy something that we need to clean up later. Also, we provide services to a lot of different customers. So, and the constraints we have are, well, it's constrained by the most demanding of our customers, right? So in a lot of situations, you can do with a lot less. So the constraints on sizes and CPU, they're much tighter for us than typically. On the other hand, we also have some things that make it a lot easier for us. We're small, only 5,000 employees, most of which are not technical at all. And that's, for an organization that's really small, it's quite easy to actually go to a team and talk to people. If you're in a lot of other organizations, it's much harder. And we control most of the software we run ourselves, which is also quite rare. Basically, all software we've written ourselves. We use a lot of software instead of hardware, so that makes things a lot easier as well. We started in thinking about this in 2017 and started our first experiment in 2018. Why this early? Is because we know that migrations take a long time. I don't think it will be 10 years, as Bart said. It was less time than 10 years, but from TLS 1.3, no, these migrations take years. TLS 1.3 is an example that took quite a long time. I think with PQ we're beating it on the timeline, but it's still years. And Bart already covered this. We see it as two migrations, the key agreement against store now, decrypt later, and the signatures. So one nice surprise in the EU roadmap is that they have this risk levels, low, medium, high. Low is we don't care. Medium includes signatures, and high includes key agreement for data that we care about. There's a bit more subtlety. There's one annoying thing in the EU classification. They also say that medium priority is upgrading symmetric cryptography, which I think is a waste of time. It's not a waste of time in the sense that it's hard. I mean, it's not hard upgrading, and it doesn't cost a lot, at least on the technological side. It doesn't cost a lot to upgrade symmetric cryptography. But the problem is organizations have only so much time to do anything. And if there's an organization that wastes time upgrading AES 128 to AES 256 somewhere, that's time that could have been used to remove RSA somewhere. So I think it's quite problematic. And although it doesn't hurt, so why should we push back? I think we should push back because of that, because we will not, as an industry as a whole, we will not finish in time. It will just not happen. Whether the quantum computer will be here in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, we will not migrate everything. So we better migrate the things that matter. Okay. Key agreement is the easier one. It tells a nice story. It's your data. Data has to be protected. So it galvanizes people. Although if you look at some organizations that do risk management, they're not that impressed typically. But we care about it, and it's to get started. So in 2019, we tested with Chrome. We saw protocol ossification issues where although TLS allows the extensibility to have bigger keys, if extensibility is not used in practice, you often see that it breaks, which was the case here. So slow ramp up, reaching out to vendors, trying to fix it, usual story. But ramping up, we managed. There's an aside. This is this feasibility study. Protocol observation was the big problem. Performance, we saw that that's actually quite good. Not a big problem. We deployed a hybrid, and I want to say something about hybrids. So a lot of people say, I mean, this is also what I write in a blog when I talk about hybrids. It's security. If the PQ part is broken, then at least we have the traditional part still. But if you're really serious about post-quantum security, then it doesn't give you anything, right? We want the post-quantum security. If the post-quantum bit is broken, we don't have anything. There is an advantage for implementation security. If there's a side channel bug in the implementation, then it helps still. Or if it's an active attack, then it helps a bit. But the main reason why hybrids are key and absolutely essential also going forward is that if I use a hybrid, I don't need to ask permission. If I have we have some customers that like PQ and want it now. Right? We have some customers that don't care at all. They think it's all hype and bullshit. And there's a lot of customers that don't know, are disinterested, but they do know that they don't want us to do something new or risk compliance. So that's the key thing about hybrids. With it, we can deploy it now. We can just keep the traditional thing we had for compliance and etc. and add the PQ on top without having to ask anyone for permission. So that's the upside. The downside is that they're an absolute pain to standardize. So I think if things are hard, they're easy to standardize because not a lot of people have opinions. If things are very easy, they're very easy to standardize because everyone agrees. But if something is just hard enough that people have opinions, or someone can say, but actually, or write a paper about it, then things become very hard, and hybrids are in the sweet spot there. Yes?
Quick question there. Sorry for interrupting. At least for the hybrids, I thought for CAMs, for example, should there be exit standards?
Oh, everyone has standards.
Okay.
Yes, every group has a. For years, I've seen presentations now where everyone says, "Oh, we can do with an XOR, or we can do with this, we can do with this." Everyone has opinions. But no, the thing is, we don't need standards. We need standard, right? We need one. we don't need 20. We don't need differing opinions. And with hybrids, it's actually worse, right? Because you have, if you have a hybrid, what do you hybridize? I mean, we have the whole elliptic curve fragmentation, which we're getting. We have the post-quantum fragmentation, which we're also importing. We have the choices about security levels. We have the way to hybridize. I mean, these are already, each of them have choices, and you multiply them. It's terrible. Luckily, with at least in TLS, there's a few big parties who have been pushing this, and that helps that the options are limited, which is essential. Because if you have multiple stands, I mean, it sounds nice to have multiple stands, but it means that people have to implement things multiple times, they have to test it multiple times, they have to do things multiple times, and then you talk to a customer and they have a list of what they have to implement, you have a list of what to implement. As if there's no intersection, god damn it, you have to go back and upgrade things again. Anyway, so fragmentation is a big issue which you try to minimize. But anyway, so hybrids, even though they're completely, there is not a real security content in the difference in the way to do hybrids. It is very overblown, but it's still hard enough that people have opinions. So it's quite embarrassing that, well, for TLS we have the hybrid now, but a generic hybrid bridge can be used in more places. The ITF is looking at it, and I think it will take at least a year or more before there's a standard there, which is problematic. Okay, adoption in TLS. So it's in a great shape now. Chrome, Firefox, and Edge, they have all sending post-quantum ML-Chem hybrids, sending them by default. Safari is rolling it out next week with iOS 26. A lot of OpenSSL 3.5 is enabling it by default. A lot of other platforms, Go and Zig, enabled it by default. And this is great. This is what we want, enabled by default. And because of that, we now see about, now it's 40%, but I think next week and the week after, I expect we will go to maybe even 60% of all connections with us are already using post-quantum encryption.
Do you have any figures for the back end from...
Yes, in a hidden slide.
Okay.
In the backend, it was, we looked at it 2 years ago, and it was only 0.5%,
Yeah.
but it had been growing. I think from the top of my head, it's 3.5% now. But also with the backend, it's with us. It's like people put us in front so that they don't need to worry too much about the backend. But there are things around it. You can install a tunnel or something like this. But yeah,
It's a question of where you harvest.
Yes. But it's true. But on a different perspective, the backend with us is worse, right? Because people put us in front of crappy old origins. Whereas with a Chrome, I think a year ago, from the top of my head, I think David Adrian said it's like 28% of Chrome is already PQ by then, and then for us that was a similar number. But that's because Google deployed, so YouTube, Facebook has deployed it. This was before Facebook deployed it. Amazon is working on it. Do they have it? I'm not quite sure. Akamai will do it soon, so I think that side, from the client perspective, it will also, maybe not next week, but I wouldn't be surprised if next year it might get to 50% from traffic, yeah. You see the two bumps here, this is Chrome desktop, and then that was Android. And the reason that it's later is because there was performance degradation in the core web metrics, but it was small. But it was big enough for Android at least that they needed a bit more sign-offs and a bit more measurement. So it's a non-trivial, so the 1 kilobyte extra for MLCam. It was not a lot of performance degradation, but it was enough that it at least caused a delay. And as I said, it's not a technical challenge mostly. So in 2023, we worked on, we just talked about the connection from browser to us and the connection from us to origins, but there's also our internal connections and our internal services. And that by far has been the most expensive thing we've done in PQ. So all the years of standardization, my salary, all my colleagues that work on it, is nothing compared to what it cost us to make a start. Well, quite far with migrating our internal connections. And the problem is that because organizations even we don't know everything that we're running, at least there's no one that knows it. What we had to do is we had to go to every single team and ask them, what are your services, what is at risk, what are you running, where do you use cryptography, and give them guidance to help upgrade. Every single team has to do something. And teams are not TLS, they're not cryptography experts. They don't necessarily even know if they use TLS, they just don't know it. And this means that an engineering team has to context switch to looking at this, right? So they have a first meeting, then have to sit down, have to understand it, then have to ask questions, because even if you give the best guidance, they won't understand. So one of the most common questions during this effort we got is, we had a great flow chart, which was like, somewhere in the flow chart, does your application use TLS? If so, yes, you're in an easy case, you follow these instructions. And one of the most common questions we got back is, how do I know if I use TLS? These things are hidden in layers, right? Cryptography it's both top down and bottom up, but you have to also go into all these layers of abstractions. Engineers don't know how their application is connected. How do they? It's a legitimate question. How do they figure this out? These things are hard, and very time consuming, because these engineering teams, even if they only spent a fraction of a quarter on this, there's a fraction of a quarter that could have built a feature which actually gives revenue, right? Direct revenue. But we got pretty far. We prioritized the important ones, and the vast majority of especially the sensitive connections, are now using post-quantum encryption, so key agreements. On the upside, we did not encounter any compatibility issues. So no protocol ossifications, at least on our internal connections. So there are some more takeaways from there, and I think I kind of have a partial disagreement with Mike here. So we agree here that figuring out what to do is the bulk of the work. I think that's safe to say, right? It's in fact, teams spend a lot of time to figure out that they are already done, right? If they use our standard library for we have internally, then it's already turning on PQ by default. They didn't have to do anything. But it took time for them to figure out that they didn't have to do anything at all. And so looking from this, it makes a lot of sense to put the CBOM, to put inventory as a quick first action. It's something that people, even if there's no finished standard, people can do it now. You can advise that people can do it now already. But the problem with putting CBOM as a separate work item is that people will do all this work to figure it out. They have the CBOM, and then they can wait for the migration, and they forget again. The application changes. The people that worked are not anymore, and not there anymore. And the next time they actually want to do the migration, they have to start mostly from scratch again. So what I would say is you have to figure out what needs to be done. And in most cases, it will be relatively easy, and then just do it. Just do it. And if you can't do it, then write it down that you have to do it. And if you're a bigger organization, so we are relatively small, but if you're bigger, some organizations work different than others, and some organizations, a CBOM will fit much better. It's part of how the organization works. Make the CBOM at the same time. But I would say the first step is, once you figure out what to do it quickly, and then continue. Okay, so that's one. So then the question is what to have as a first step. And I would say just instead of doing everything, do pilots. Because what I also noticed is that engineers are scared of crypto. So the very first few products that we migrated, the engineers, they wanted everything. They wanted, what if this goes wrong? What can go wrong? And they didn't take it into a normal migration. They created a separate migration just for the PQ, separate release cycle just for the PQ thing. They didn't take it into normal release. They did it separately. They wanted to be very careful. They wanted to cross every T, dot every I. But once the first 2-3 products were migrated and people saw that nothing happened, it just works. The other products are like, oh yeah, I didn't even have to ask some of them. They already rolled it out in one of the releases. They weren't bothered at all anymore. So these first few pilots are very important to just make this migration routine. And in fact, I think a lot of people will know that, will find that they are already using PQ a lot, just by normal software updates. Right? For the PQ key agreement is easy because it's just a software update and a configuration update on both sides. Okay, so pilots are important. If you can't do if you don't have an inventory of everything yet, if you can't upgrade everything yet, just start with a few things that are easy, and that's really important to to make it the new normal, and to show that it's not that scary. Another thing is that we've seen is that manual configuration is very, very harmful. If you don't overwrite the defaults, then you get PQ for free a lot of the times. For instance, OpenSSL enables PQ by default. Now the painful thing is, I don't know who here has ever used SSL Labs to configure their website to get an A? No one? So a lot of administrators, especially those that are security conscious, they will go to the website, or also auditors, they will go to SSL Labs, look at the grade and say, you only have a C or a B, you need to get an A. And how do you get an A? You Google for how do I get an A with the name of my software. I have Nginx, I Google what I need, I see a configuration, I copy paste it into my server configuration, and now I have an SSL Labs A grade. The problem there is that part of that configuration is it selects the ciphers to use. So if you're security conscious, if you get that A on SSL labs, that also means that with a software update that added PQ, you don't get PQ because you manually configured stuff. Manual configuration is really bad because of this. Another reason is that it's really hard. People just copy paste. They don't know what it means. They don't have the context, and we can't expect them to have this context. So what helped us is, as much as possible, and was hard to avoid, is to make the default sensible. And if there needs to be configuration, and somewhere there has to be, then we configure intent. So the intent is, we need FIPS compliance here. We don't want people to configure, these are the FIPS curves. No. We just configure the library with, we need FIPS compliance, or we need this compliance, and then the library hidden to the application developers, they figures out how to achieve it. Okay. So configuring cryptography per product is absolutely not scalable. We have to have safe defaults. That's the way to go. Also going forward, if something turns out to be weak, if we need to move to something else, we don't want to do this whole migration again. Okay, key agreements, urgent, easier, and I think soon with 50%, it's the new baseline of the internet. And that took 6 years. Post-quantum signatures will take much longer. Even though we only need it in whenever it is, it will take a lot more time because more parties are involved that need to agree. Also, there's no urgency yet. Not everyone is, I could sell key agreement. I can sell that to our executive to have made that investment to do it now, but moving everything internally to post-quantum certificates, that's a much harder sell. There's no security benefit today. If I want to sell it, I have to get to show them which customers want it. Of course, there's customers that want it, especially since the start of the year, we've seen an enormous tick up in customers that are calling us about PQ, which is amazing. And this is the way that we actually are able to move ahead. So, as Bart said, you were a bit cynical about the timelines, but the 2030 and 2035 that are arbitrary. But these timelines are absolutely essential to get customers to start asking vendors about it. And once we know that people actually start asking about it, we can make the biggest investments which are required to finish the job. Right? A few POCs here and there, they are nice, but it's you really need to have this urgency to actually get things moving. Okay, so many more parties involved. None of the post-quantum signature schemes are great. They're quite honestly quite terrible from a performance perspective. No, they're really not. And this has been mentioned again, that Falcon is scary. Don't use Falcon unless you are very sure what you're doing. And this is very web specific. There are a lot of signatures on the web. Usually there's just one key agreement. But signatures, they were so cheap and so nice. They can just solve things. Just put another signature on it. That's another problem. So if we just put in MLD 44, we add 17 kilobytes. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot. It is not even a JPEG. But we did some experimentation to see the effect of it. Chrome was already annoyed with the 1 kilobyte for MLChem, and they are much more annoyed by the signatures, and they have stated that even adding 7 kilobytes we're not going to do it before Q day. So basically they're saying we're not going to deploy MLD 44 before Q day. So for us, an interesting statistic is of our quick connections, which means quick because that's mostly used by browsers and by human-initiated connections. So of our human-initiated quick connections with us, half of them, including the certificates today, are transferring less than 8 kilobytes. Given that the median size of a certificate chain today, classically, is 3.5 kilobytes, that means that today, 40% of what we're transferring over half of our quick connections is already just certificates, right? And then we should increase that by 17 kilobytes. That's hard. And the thing is, it's probably pretty easy for me to get a button so that someone can enable it. But if you have a button, no one turns a button, right? Either you enable it by default or you don't enable it at all, because customers don't press buttons. I mean, everyone says if you want a feature not to happen, you say, okay, we put it behind the button. Yeah, okay. Of course, that's the performance. Of course, there's also protocol ossification, big signatures. If there's big certificate chains, then we see that some mailboxes and clients break. This is also one of the reasons that we need to have 2 chains side by side. There's some proposals where you have just one chain where there's a PQ part that you can ignore, but that won't work because that doesn't allow for a gradual upgrade when you have protocol ossification. That's an aside. All in all, I'd say if you see it's there in a few years, if we know that the quantum computer is tangibly imminent, it won't break the web, we will move to it. But I'm really worried that if we don't start deploying it now, we will leave even more people behind than that we are leaving behind right now. Well, the NIST signatures on-ramp is mentioned, which is great. It's really exciting. The progress there has been phenomenal compared to 2 years ago. And the progress hasn't stopped yet. But I think we're too late to assume that this will fix it. We have to do with what we have now, at least for the first round of deployment. If we get lucky and there's some good schemes survive, we will move to something smaller later. But we just can't assume that this will fix our problems. But there are other measures we can take, right? There are ways we can decrease the number of signatures. So one of the things I'm particularly excited about is we're changing the way, trying to change the way CAs work. So we're significantly reducing the number of signatures with a proposal we call Merkle tree certificates. Very briefly, the idea is that you have batch signing. The CA does batch signing, also publishes the transparency tree. Browsers regularly fetch distinguished landmarks, distinguished tree heads of the Merkle trees. So browser has for each CA a bunch of tree heads that's been pre-configured with. The browser tells the server when it connects, hey, I have these tree heads already. And then the server, instead of sending you the whole chain and all these signatures, it can just send you one authentication path, which is very small, which certifies everything. That's a big lift though, because it means changing a lot of things. But the pain is big enough that this actually seems to be worthwhile. We're also, so with Chrome, we're probably rolling this out maybe end of year, beginning of early, we started with experimentation at the IETF at the plans birds of a feather. We'll standardize this. So actually, the solution doesn't necessarily have to be drop-in replacement. The solution can be rethinking the way you do things. Although that's easier said than done, because people will only start working on it when it's too late, and when it's too late, they don't have time to actually sit back and think properly about bigger changes. But that is the world. Yeah, this is the explanation of Merkle trees. There was one more remark I wanted to make with signatures, is that I think the fragmentation there is even worse because there's less direct urgency with the security. People are like, oh yeah, there's also not a lot of deployment yet, so I really expect that the fragmentation with signatures will be much, much worse. Also, if you look at the standards for hybrid signatures, embarrassingly are not in a great shape yet at all. There's work on it. I hope things will move quicker now that people are asking for them. But there's a real risk there that we will see a complete fragmentation in the different signature hybrids we have. and people will just deploy whatever they happen to have in their POC, and there will be a big pain there. Anyway, okay. I think these were all the remarks I wanted to make. So the bottom line on signatures is less urgent, path very unclear. Real risk we start migrating too late. I also had a slide on, I mean, this is just the two simplest kind of cryptography. That's signatures and encryption. It's the basic stuff. It's the stuff that should be boring. There's a lot of exciting cryptography that now only recently starts getting deployed. Right? Blind signatures is used a lot by, for instance, Apple. The anonymous credentials. I mean, the EU wallet. Even if they're wise enough to use anonymous credentials, by the time they standardize that stuff, they will have to start over again to do it with PQ. But I think Kars will have a nice presentation on those aspects. Okay, that was what I want to say. Thank you.